Antro. The dorm room billionaire. It started in a cramped college dorm room where the floor was covered in computer parts, the air smelled like warm circuitry, and a 19-year-old kid was quietly building something that would one day shake the entire tech industry. While other students were studying for midterms or partying on Friday nights, Michael Dell was sitting at a cheap wooden desk, assembling custom PCs with the calm focus of someone who already knew he didn't fit into the life others expected for him. Every screw he tightened, every motherboard he swapped, every machine he upgraded brought him one step closer to a decision that would change not only his life, but the future of personal computers. He didn't have a business plan. He didn't have investors. All he had was $1,000, a dorm room, and the belief that people shouldn't have to overpay for a computer. Nobody, not his classmates, not his professors, not even his own parents, had any idea that this quiet side hustle was about to become a billion-dollar company. Setup. A kid obsessed with taking things apart. Before Michael Dell ever sold his first computer, he was the kind of kid who couldn't walk past a machine without wondering what was hidden inside it. While most children played with toys, Michael had a different habit. He took things apart. Radios, calculators, even his family's first Apple computer. If it had screws, it was coming open. His room looked less like a kid's bedroom and more like a tiny workshop. Circuits scattered across the carpet, metallic parts neatly arranged on the desk, the soft clicking of tools replacing the usual noise of TV cartoons. He wasn't breaking things, he was studying them, trying to understand why they worked, how they worked, and how they could work better. By the time he reached high school, that curiosity had turned into skill. He upgraded computers for friends, installed components, and taught himself everything the manual never explained. But even then, nobody imagined he was preparing for something much bigger, because soon, Michael wouldn't just be fixing computers, he'd be competing with the companies that built them. Conflict begins. College wasn't his plan. It was his parents'. Michael Dell didn't walk into college with excitement, he walked in with expectation. His parents wanted him to become a doctor, so he enrolled in pre-med at the University of Texas, even though his heart was nowhere near a hospital or a lab coat. Picture this: a massive campus buzzing with students, lecture halls packed with future surgeons and biologists, and Michael, sitting in the back row, quietly realizing he didn't belong here. The smell of dry erase markers, the echo of professors' voices, the endless pages of biology notes, none of it ignited him the way a disassembled computer did. But buried under the weight of family pressure, he kept his real passion hidden. In the evenings, while his classmates studied anatomy, Michael returned to his dorm room, opened his toolbox, and slipped right back into the world he actually understood: wires, processors, and the hum of a machine powering on. He wasn't trying to rebel. He was just trying to breathe. What started as a small side hobby quickly grew into something impossible to ignore, even for a kid trying to keep a low profile. Because in that dorm room, a business was quietly being born. The first breakthrough. Selling custom PCs from a dorm desk. It started with a simple realization. People were paying far too much for computers that weren't even built for their needs. Michael saw it firsthand. Students frustrated with slow machines, families confused by overpriced models, customers wishing they could choose exactly what they wanted instead of what manufacturers forced on them. So, he did something no one else on campus was doing. He offered to build computers customized for the buyer, faster, cheaper, and directly from his dorm room. Imagine the scene: a small wooden desk pushed against the wall, stacks of cardboard boxes filled with parts, the constant buzz of the dorm hallway mixing with the soft whir of cooling fans. Michael sitting cross-legged on the floor, piecing together components with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Word spread fast, first through his dorm, then through the entire university, and soon, people far beyond campus were calling his room number, asking for a custom-built PC. Students walked in with cash, local businesses mailed him orders, and his tiny workspace suddenly felt more like a miniature factory than a college living space. He wasn't just helping people save money. He was offering something the big companies weren't: control over what they bought. And the demand kept growing, to a point where it would force him to make a decision 19-year-old expects to face. Rising action. The $1,000 that changed everything. Michael Dell didn't start his company with a grand strategy. He started it with $1,000 and a gut feeling that he could build better computers than anyone was selling. It was a tiny amount of money, but in his hands, it became fuel for something much bigger. On a warm Texas afternoon in 1984, he walked into a bank and officially registered his new venture. PCs Limited. No fancy office. No employees. Just a 19-year-old kid filing paperwork while wearing the same worn-out sneakers he used for walking to class. Back in his dorm, that $1,000 quickly transformed into inventory. Processors, drives, cases stacked high against the wall, leaving barely enough space to walk. The room smelled like cardboard and fresh plastic, with tools scattered across the bed and handwritten order forms taped to the desk. But the moment he launched the business, everything accelerated. Orders came in faster. Phone calls didn't stop. Local buyers lined up because he could build exactly what they wanted, and cheaper than the big manufacturers could dream of. Suddenly, skipping class wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a necessity just to keep the business alive. Michael wasn't juggling school and work anymore. He was drowning in opportunity. And the success became too big too fast for one person to ignore, especially his parents. The turning point. The call no entrepreneur wants. The moment Michael Dell feared finally arrived. A phone call from his parents, and they weren't calling to chat. They had discovered the truth. Their 19-year-old pre-med student wasn't studying. He was running a fast-growing computer business out of a dorm room. The conversation wasn't angry, it was disbelief. They couldn't understand why their son, who was supposed to follow a stable, respected career, was risking everything on a little side project. To them, computers were a hobby. To Michael, they were the future. So his parents drove to Austin. They walked into his apartment, and what they saw stunned them. Boxes of components stacked to the ceiling. Phones ringing off the hook, invoices spread across the table. A 19-year-old running what looked less like a hobby and more like a real company. They gave him an ultimatum: shut the business down and focus on school. The pressure was crushing, but inside, Michael already knew the truth. He wasn't supposed to be a doctor. He wasn't supposed to follow the safe path, and in that moment, he made the decision that defined his life. He dropped out and went all in on his company. That single choice, uncomfortable, risky, and unexpected, became the pivot point that would change the entire personal computer industry. Level up. From dorm room to headquarters. The day Michael Dell left college, everything changed. Because suddenly, the dorm room wasn't big enough for the vision he was chasing. He rented a small office in North Austin. Nothing glamorous. Plain white walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and enough space for a few desks and piles of computer parts. But to Michael, it felt like stepping into a new world. A world where he was no longer a student with a side hustle. He was a founder. Orders kept flooding in. Phones rang non-stop. Delivery trucks dropped off components every morning, the sound of metal loading ramps echoing through the parking lot. Inside, the space buzzed with the clatter of keyboards, the rustle of shipping labels, and the constant assembling of custom machines. Faster, cheaper, and more efficient than what the big companies were selling. And the numbers? They exploded. In 1 year, PCs Limited went from a dorm room startup to pulling in tens of millions in revenue, all built on a simple idea: sell directly to the customer, skip the middleman, and give people exactly the computer they want. What started with $1,000 and a desk lamp had officially become a real operation, one that the traditional PC giants were starting to notice. But the bigger Dell grew, the bigger the enemies became. The big gamble. Taking on giants like IBM. Taking on IBM in the 1980s was like a kid with a slingshot walking into a battlefield of tanks. And Michael Dell knew exactly how crazy it looked. IBM was the gold standard of computers. Massive factories, global distribution, endless resources. Meanwhile, Dell had a small office, a growing team, and a business model no one took seriously, direct-to-consumer. But that was precisely his advantage. While IBM spent millions on retail distribution, Dell built every machine after an order came in. No warehouses full of aging inventory. No wasted parts. No middlemen taking a cut. Customers got faster PCs at lower prices, a formula that made IBM's bulky process look ancient. Inside Dell's office, the mood was electric. Phones ringing non-stop. Technicians assembling machines at lightning speed. Boxes labeled with handwritten tags, ready for delivery. Every day felt like a sprint, and every sale felt like a jab at the giants who said this model would never work. And then the numbers proved it. By age 24, Michael Dell had built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, becoming the youngest CEO ever to lead a Fortune 500-bound business. The industry understood the message clearly. The kid from the dorm room wasn't just competing, he was rewriting the rules. But this was just the beginning, because the next gamble would push Dell from a rising challenger to a global powerhouse. Climax. The billion-dollar leap. The moment Michael Dell decided to take his company public, everything went from fast to unbelievably fast. On a warm June morning in 1988, as the stock market buzzed to life, Dell Computer Corporation made its debut, and the reaction was explosive. Traders crowded around terminals. Screens flashed green as the stock surged, and somewhere in Austin, the 23-year-old founder, who once built PCs on a dorm room floor, watched his company skyrocket past a $1 billion valuation. The numbers were unreal. Dell's revenue had doubled and doubled again. Its direct-to-consumer model, the one critics mocked, was now forcing the entire industry to adapt or fall behind. Michael had done something almost no one in tech history had done. He built a billion-dollar empire before finishing his 20s. The company expanded across the U.S., into Europe, then Asia. Each new office a reminder of how far he'd come from that cramped room in Texas filled with boxes and spare parts. Dell Computers now shipped worldwide, the brand carried by a philosophy simple enough to fit on a post-it. Build what people want, not what companies want to sell. But with global growth came global pressure, and Michael was about to learn that the higher a company rises, the tougher the battle to stay on top becomes. Resolution. The legacy of a dorm room hustler. Michael Dell didn't just build a company. He built a blueprint for what one determined person can do with a simple idea and relentless execution. From a cramped dorm room surrounded by boxes and spare parts, he grew a startup into one of the most influential tech companies on the planet, proving that innovation doesn't need permission, it just needs obsession. Today, Dell Technologies stands as a global giant, shaping everything from personal computers to enterprise infrastructure. But Michael's legacy isn't just in the machines his company produced. It's in the mindset he proved possible, that a teenager with $1,000, a screwdriver, and a clear vision can rewrite an entire industry. His story is a reminder that success doesn't always start with resources. Sometimes, it starts with frustration, with curiosity, with the courage to chase the path everyone else thinks is unreasonable. And what began as a college student ignoring the safe route became one of the greatest entrepreneurship stories of the modern era.